Alright, so welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be going through a lot of trains that I was recently gifted for free, as well as another little item. So first off, I'll get into this other item. This is a small die-cast logging caboose, which I was given. I really like it. This is from a railroad, I believe, in New York, and it is actually based off a real caboose. GRR 71 is a real caboose, and I am very much happy to have this one. So I'll get this out of the way, and then we'll go on to the whole big lot of stuff. So first off, I'll be starting off with the rolling stock, and first, more specifically, tenders, because I got 3 extra tenders with this, which don't fit with any of the engines. So first off, this is a Mantua Southern Pacific tender, which, it's just a basic Mantua tender. It can pick up power if needed. This one's sort of interesting. This is a die-cast Fleischmann tender. The base it's sitting on, and that whole situation's a bit weird. I don't know if I have much use for it, but it's sort of interesting. Then next up, this tender I might actually have a use for. This is an old-time Southern Pacific tender, and if anyone remembers, I have some older Rivarossi 240s, and I was thinking about upgrading one, and this tender could be a good, nicer fit for it. Then next up, we have just 2 pieces of rolling stock. First off is this Bachmann Middletown and New Jersey boxcar. It's a bit just plain, but it's interesting. I've never heard of this railroad before. It also needs to have some couplers installed. Other than that, it's just a car. And lastly, and I find this the most interesting, is a interesting Varney caboose. So obviously these ladders need a whole bunch of work, and I'll probably want to repaint it and need new couplers, but it's really interesting. I've wanted a similar caboose for quite a while, and I am pretty happy to have one of these short bay windows. So I'll get this stuff cleaned up, and then I'll show you the main attraction of this, the engines. Alright, so on to the engines. So first off, this is a Plarail, I believe F7, but it's got a Bachmann F9 shell. Before getting into the chassis, I have always been a fan of these shells, and I wanted to get a Bachmann engine with one. I just really like the reflective chrome on it, even though it's not realistic whatsoever. This engine will end up needing new couplers because these don't spin very well. This one, not at all. But then the chassis, again, it's made by PlayArt, which is weird. The only immediate issue that I see is that it's missing 2 of these traction tires, and they seem to be pretty deep grooves. So that could be a bit of an issue, and it's also a really light model. So later on, after I show you the rest of these engines, we'll test all of them. So that's this one out of the way. Let's go on to the next engine. Alright, so on to the next engine, which is this, a PlayArt 040, which, if anyone was curious, I'm pretty sure is just technically a lifelike 040, which was sold under PlayArt. It's got basically the exact same drivetrain, detail, all that stuff. And if you'll notice, this currently has a Union Pacific tender, but the engine itself says PRR. I do have a PRR tender, which I just showed you a few seconds ago, I believe, but it's not the same manufacturer. So these two are meant to go together. The tender won't actually work well with this. So we've just got to have a mismatch of railroads on this for now. And the only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is my other lifelike 040, which, again, this is basically the exact same thing, had a cracked main gear. So I'm a little bit concerned about this having the same issue, but again, we'll see when we test it. Alright, so this next one is a model which is very interesting to me. This is a Varney, I believe, SW7. It's got some issues. I don't think the screw is supposed to be here. This front part's all loose. It's got some, I believe, mold flashing left on the model. This coupler isn't very good. But what's interesting is that this is probably a model made in the 50s, and it's also fully made out of die-cast. I'm not sure if I want to leave this model as it is cosmetically, or if I want to overhaul it, do something nice to it. I don't know yet. It's still a thing I need to think a bit about, but I'm pretty sure I will have a video of fixing up this engine at some point in the near future. So that's about all I'll have to say about this one. It's also got a sort of interesting drive system, but that's it for this one. on to the next engine. Alright, so next up, we have this, which is a Bachmann Santa Fe 060. It's one of the Bachmann steamers with the split chassis. I had one of these a while ago, and it didn't end all that well. And again, as you've probably noticed, the tender doesn't match the engine. It's just the tenders that came with them. I'm going to leave it like this just for now, until I can get some sort of suitable workaround solved. But yeah, the only real concern I have about this engine is that it could have either a cracked main gear again, or just some other quartering issue. It doesn't look like it has a quartering issue, but I could be wrong, which I'm a little bit more concerned about this model's chance of running when we go and test them out. So that's this one, and now on to the last model. So lastly is a sort of interesting model, which I don't know exactly what it's based on in real life, but it is a Bachmann Santa Fe 280. I've heard pretty much just straight bad about these models. It does look pretty decent, but I've heard they have a big issue with unquartering, split axles, sort of like the 060 that I just showed you, which is a little bit concerning. So I really don't have much trust that this will be a good model. I was told it would be fine if I also just ended up using these models for parts. So I'm not too incredibly concerned about it. The tender, for once, does actually match, and the engine, unlike everything else here, already has a Kadee installed, which might be a good sign. It might run. I don't know. But let's get all 5 engines over to the track, and let's test them out. Alright, so first up, I've got the Bachmann 280 set up on the track. I'm testing these engines in the order of least likely to most likely to run. So I don't have high hopes for this engine, but let's see what it does. Oh, it sounded like something. Give it a little push. More power, I think. Definitely doing stuff. That's not entirely great. However, it is indeed running. It might just need a bit of fresh oil and some of the old oil cleaned out of it. That's much better than I was expecting. So, on to the next engine. Alright, so I've got the player F unit all set up on the track. And if it works, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a grinding noise, because when setting it up on the track, I could definitely hear the flanges without the traction tires scraping on the ties. So if it does make a horrid noise when it runs, I would assume that's the reason. So let's see if it moves at all. That's better than I was expecting. Just picked up that one truck without traction tires off the track. It seemed like it ran pretty well. So I'm thinking this might not even need fresh oil or anything at the moment. Might just need to get a pair of traction tires and stick them on the model, and it'll be good to go, which is a pretty big relief. So on to the next engine. Alright, so next up, I've got the Bachmann 060 set up on the track. I really don't know if this one will run or not, but we're going to try it anyway. That seemed like something. It does seem to run, but it definitely sounds like it'll need a lot of work. So that's also better than I was expecting. So, on to the next engine. Next up, I've got the Varney SW7, which is going to be sort of an oddball. Something about it tells me that it might have a better chance of running, but we'll see. It does run, but that doesn't sound very healthy. So yeah, that's one that'll definitely need a whole bunch of work. But it does indeed run, and it started up pretty quickly. So, on to the last engine, the Playart 040. Alright, so this is the engine that I have the most confidence in, aside from a potential cracked gear. These lifelike 040s, which basically is what this Playart one is, tend to be really reliable. So let's see if it does indeed run. Yes, it does. Might need a little bit of fresh oil, but that sounds pretty good. No clicking, none of that. But yeah, that is all the engines done and tested. So thanks for watching.